And I'm joined by Chris of the Commas. How you keeping, buddy?
I've been doing pretty good. Lots of busyness happening in studio and practices and stuff, prepping for the upcoming tour, but busy is good.
Nice one, man. Like you say, in a few weeks' time, you'll be hitting the our UK shores, and can't wait to have you over here, man. I've got to chat to Adam, the drummer of the Commoners last year. I got to have a chat with Adam, and he was saying then he was sort of teasing that, um, you guys were looking at UK dates then, so it's good that these have come to fruition and that you're going to be gracing our shores, dude.
Oh, we're all super excited about it. I mean, yeah, back then when you spoke to Adam, we were just starting to receive a lot of that positive press that we were getting over in the UK, and it's pretty exceptional how well we've been received over there, and it's humbling and it's awesome to see people on the other side of an ocean appreciating the music that we put out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the style of music you guys do. Really good hard rock is something that's always going to be in favour with a lot of people over here. There's a big scene for it. I know when I heard find a better way when that came through my emails and all that when I first heard you guys, it was something that instantly pricked up my ears. And I think a lot of people felt the same. I know Ross recently spoke to another friend of mine, Mr. Ryan Vasey, who does the Beyond the Vibe podcast, and me and
Yeah,
Ryan both chatting before I'd spoken to Adam, before he'd spoken to Ross, and obviously before I'd spoken to yourself, just about how excited we were once we heard this record. Like, me and Ryan are on similar wavelengths when it comes to music. So it was very much of a man, have you heard this? Yes, sort of thing. And there's a good buzz about you, man.
that's very cool. Yeah, it's honestly it's surreal, and it's what all musicians want to hear when we put so much time and effort into something. You go into recording a record like that, and it's almost like being in the dungeon of creating music, and the outside world gets cut off from it, and you're never quite sure how things are going to be received. You can kind of try and perceive how that's going to happen, but you never really know till you put it out there. And then to get the reception that it got in the UK it's been humbling, and it's been great. I mean, it's the best part about making music is getting to read all the reviews that people are putting out about the records, and some really sincere stuff about lyrical things and understanding some of the underlying themes in the album. You can tell that there have been some reviews of people who really gave it a good listen and appreciate what we did on that album, and that's very gratifying as a musician.
I bet, man. I mean, obviously you had your previous release beforehand. You had No Stranger album, but this was the
Yeah.
first album of this incantation of the band. Did it
Mhm.
therefore feel when you were writing this album more of a second debut more than a second album?
Yeah, well, that's precisely it. We had a lot of time where we did a lot of self-reflection as a band, about what we wanted to be and what are some of the issues that we had with previous releases we had put out were, and really sort of found ourselves as a band and put a concentrated effort into creating a really, I think, what was a cohesive listening experience for people with this new record. We really wanted to tap into that vibe from a lot of our favorite roots rock and rock and roll bands and soul bands and stuff like that, where you put on a record and there's the side A and B, and you listen to it and it takes you through a whole experience, right? So you can
Yeah,
listen to something not just as individual songs, but as a curated music listening experience.
I think that's what I enjoyed about the album, mate, was that with it didn't feel like there's certain albums that feel like um a collaboration of singles, for want of a better term, and then there's
Yeah.
albums that feel like a whole piece, that feel like a whole album, an album that in the more traditional way, which is the way I like to listen to music. You should listen to it, preferably on vinyl from start to finish, and just let it take you on that journey throughout the whole thing. And yeah, Find a Better Way definitely felt like that when I heard it. It was just a complete piece. You've got your textures in there, your lighter shades, and you sort of more heavier more rocked up songs, and it's just a fantastic record, mate. So I can't wait to have you over on UK soil and come see you with my good friend Troy, who you're usually doing the
Uh,
shows with. It's going to be a great tour, man. I'm coming to the Nottingham show, so me and Ryan hooking up because he lives a couple hours away from me, but we sort of made a concerted effort to find a joint venue so we can come and enjoy it together.
Man, I'm looking forward to it so much. I've got a lot of family from the UK as well,
Okay,
so I've
cool.
family members coming to some shows, and I've got a few friends who happen to be laying over on flights and stuff like that. And just, I'm really looking forward to experiencing the UK, from both a cultural standpoint, but also to see what the live music fans are like, because my impression from the UK, from speaking with people and from what I've been told, is that there really is, a strong culture of live music listeners in the UK that really appreciate going out to shows and having that experience and being there. And that's always something that's really exciting when you're in a band, because
Cool.
you really have to go and perform for people. You put your energy back out there, and you know they're going to be giving it back. And that's always one of the most special things about performing live. And I
Nice.
mean, to co-headline the tour with Troy is going to be unreal. The guy's a crazy slide guitar player, and the new singles he put out really cool. So I'm looking forward to meeting him in person and being on the road for a few weeks and doing our thing. It's going to be a blast.
No, Troy's a legend, man. I mean, I'm fortunate enough. I put my own festival on here in the UK, and we've got Troy playing later this year with us. And I've known Troy for a few years now, and he's just an absolute diamond. Great time.
Right on. Yeah, no, it's gonna be awesome, man. We're all extremely stoked. We've been getting together almost every night, just, arranging set lists, trying different things, and trying to approach our live show in a similar way that we do to the album. We want to give people something different, and we want it to be an experience. When you come to one of our shows, I don't want it to just be like I put on the record. I want to give people a show, something more. And I feel like some of our favorite bands throughout history have done exactly that, where you know that when you go there, you're going to get something different than the record, and at the same time, just a really unique experience.
I think the best live bands do exactly what you just said, man. Like first gig I ever went to, my dad took me to see Aerosmith when I was 11 years old, and
That's a good,
yeah,
that's a good first gig.
yeah, and the Black Crows were supporting, so it was a very
Oh,
very good first gig.
oh
um,
yeah, man. Oh yeah.
and so it's for those two bands alone have always stood out for me. I remember, like I say, I was a little 11-year-old kid who quite liked some of his dad's records, and my dad was like, "You're coming with me and his friends to go see Aerosmith." And you come out of that and you say it's that live aspect, and there's something I've always craved at every gig I've ever seen, whether it's been a big stadium rock show that I've been to, or whether it's been a cool club night, or whether it's been a local guy down the road doing an open mic night or whatever. You want that energy, and that's, to me, is far more important than it being exactly how it is to a click track on an album, so to speak. And that's what I found with your record as well. Songs that sound to a click track, obviously they have their place. More progressive stuff, more technical metal, maybe that's absolutely what it needs to be. But I found with the rock albums that I really really love, they have that breathing space on the songs for them to be able to move. It might not be bang on the money on the click, but it's got the groove, and that's what matters. That's what gets you inside. It's not mathematics, it's the feel.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's always a place in music for the technical aspect of things, but I think specifically in our genre, there's something to be said about having that organic feeling to it, feeling like the music has a pulse. It's got its own warmth and life coming from it, and it feels organic. And that's definitely what we try and go for on the records. And same thing, like we tried to create a listening experience on that record, and I think we achieved that pretty well. I was actually just listening to it again the other day on the vinyl player here in this room, and yeah, it feels like two separate sides, and it feels like you go on a little bit of a journey. So we're sort of trying to create a similar but also different journey for people for the live show. And
Right.
obviously, just coming back from the European tour, we got to work on a lot of things, played a lot of shows in a short period of time, and really got to take a crash course to a few things. We're going to have a couple new tracks,
Oh, wicked.
um, that haven't been recorded or released yet as well. Um, we're cooking some stuff up. It's going to be a good time.
Nice one. Are you already looking to record the next record, or are you focusing on showcasing the showcasing this one for now?
There's always so much happening at one given time that I try not to look too far ahead, but for sure, new music being released in the near future is going to be an inevitability.
Yeah.
Just by the product of who we are as a band, we always want to get together and make new music and explore new ideas. Um, and we've already started doing that. So I can imagine that a new record coming down the pipe is going to be an inevitability. I can't really say timelines or anything like that, but we're definitely still in the lab cooking stuff up.
Nice one, man. And of course, alongside the tour to help promote the tour, you just released your brand new single, "More Than Mistakes,"
Yeah.
which is a great track. For those who aren't aware, I know you've said it in other interviews, but for those who aren't aware that are listening, can you give us a little bit about what the song's about and where it came from?
Well, where it came from was actually a groove that Adam laid down.
No.
So it started off with just like a really cool Motown inspired drum groove. We really felt like we needed something with that kind of energy, that kind of vibe um, on the record. And we were playing with different ideas. And he came forward with that initial drum groove that you hear right off the top. And then we started writing to that. As far as overarching themes of that song, I mean, that song is really about taking ownership for me. There's a lot of things that we don't have control over in our lives, in our world, in our immediate environment, but we always have control over how we choose to proceed, how we choose to interact with those things that happen to us and around us, right?
Yeah.
So that song for me is more a sense of forgiving yourself for perhaps mistakes you've made in the past, while moving forward with a sense of self-ownership on what is going to occur as you move forward, and taking charge of the change that you want to see in yourself. And that's where certain lyrics, like find your way, right? Find your way your way. It's sort of like it's a self-exploratory thing for me lyrically in that song. And there's a few themes similar to that amongst the album scattered around as well. Um, but yeah, that song's really about taking self-responsibility and improving your life for you.
It's a powerful message, man. I mean, we've all, like you say, we all make mistakes, we all fuck up, putting it
Oh,
bluntly, in life. That's part of life, as part of the way it is. But if you own
it's,
it, learn from it, and move forward from it, then that's another man.
well, that's exactly it. You can't dwell on things like that, and we all have a tendency to. So that song is sort of rebelling against that tendency, I suppose.
That's one, bud. Oh, excuse me. So, like you say, you've released that. Now, find about way. You've no, sorry, you've already said about where you're releasing new music, haven't you? Sorry. I was about going into that. I was writing into things. But as I'm always interested, as I spoke to when I spoke to Adam, of the sort of beginnings of a musician or and someone in music. I spoke to Adam, the drummers that influenced him, but who were the singers that made you want to pick up singing? Was it singing first? Was it guitar first? I'm not sure how you started your
So
own music.
I started with guitar first, and guitar quickly became a tool for me to write. As much as I am a singer, and it's something that I put a lot of effort into, I do consider myself predominantly, alongside being a singer, a writer, because a lot of times I'm trying to convey different emotions, different concepts, and it's very, very gratifying to me to be able to work those things out and express them in a way that can be applied to almost everybody. There's something to be said for being able to put something emotionally complex
Mm.
into a simple statement that says so much more than just the statement itself. Um, so as soon as I learned guitar, I quickly started experimenting with writing things when I was quite young, I suppose, like 13 or 14, and spent a lot of time as just a solo acoustic singer songwriter. Playing a lot of patios, bar gigs, playing on the beach, um, all that sort of stuff, and just experimenting, finding my voice and how I wanted to communicate. And then eventually I ended up doing some studio time with Ross, who obviously has his own studio. He also records the band as well as being an awesome guitar player in the band. And we sort of hit it off, and then over a number of years decided we were gonna start to put something together. And you know, him and Ben, our bass player, were working at the time. Ross works with Adam, as Adam's an amazing drummer, and it just sort of came together, and we started playing as that group and working on stuff. A lot of my influences, though, growing up would surprise a lot of people, I think, based on my singing style. Like, I love rock and roll, still do. I mean, I love the Black Crowes. I love the new Marcus King record that's out right now. But I listen a lot to a lot of soul singers and musicians like Sam Cooke, Ella Fitzgerald, Otis Redding. Otis Redding probably wouldn't surprise people based on my singing style, but I would say probably one of my favorite singers of all time, and one of the most influential singers for me has been Sam Cooke. The man just has so much control and so much emotion in his voice, and the way he articulates things and the melodies and how he makes them fit with the music. I really think it's unrivaled. And I try and take a lot of, not necessarily that approach, but a lot of those lessons and the mastery in which he served the songs. He was such a great singer without ever stepping on things, without ever over singing. He always was just an amazing singer.
I think some people like that sometimes, whether, you know, whatever their instrumentation is, whether it be singing, or bass or drums, guitars, whatever it is. I think those people tend to get overlooked just how good they were, because, like you say, they don't try and overstretch. They don't try and step on other people's toes in the song, and they don't necessarily put themselves out to the forefront. But that is, you know, class in itself.
Oh yeah, and the man just had so much control over his voice. It's a very he's something to watch, especially if you watch some of the live recordings and how he was engaging with the crowd at the same time. It really was quite masterful. And then, you know, there's a lot of songwriters that I absolutely love that inspired me a lot from a writing perspective. You know, when I talk about putting things that are emotionally complex and putting them simply, you know, songwriters like Jim Croce, who are able to really say these really simple lines that just hit so hard because there's so much between the lines in them. And there's something about that writing style that I've always been very fond of. And then obviously bands that were super influential for me growing up, and just in kindling my love of listening to music, bands like the Beatles. You know, my dad is a huge Beatles fanatic, and probably some of the first songs I ever heard as a child were Beatles songs, and used to, you know, run around the house singing all that sort of stuff. So I've been blessed to be part of a fairly musical family that really helped build that love for music.
Did your family play at all, or was it just like being fans of music to listen to?
So my uncle was a examiner at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Ontario, and quite an amazing piano player. And I used to love talking to him about all of that sort of stuff musical. My dad's a huge lover of music and a visual artist, although he does know how to play and he can sing. I was just always music was always around.
Yeah.
You know, it's very much, there's a love of music in my family. And so I was exposed to it a lot. And I think a lot of times in those formative years, subconsciously, it's just always been part of my life. So I sort of just fell into it when I started to learn to play guitar. Something clicked and I was like, this is what I'm going to do.
I think that's important, just even if they're not, you know, if you haven't got musicians in the household as such. I think just having music around. I mean, my family was similar. You know, my dad, big, he played guitar a little bit, but, you know, predominantly just a lover of music, you know, but then him and my mum had very different tastes in music. Like my dad, it was all, you know, Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and Black Sabbath. And then my mum was like Prince, George Michael, all the kind of that side of things. I'm a big Motown fan though as well. My mum, big soul girl, so that side of thing came from me. And it was a household where music was just music, you know. It didn't, my dad never, although my dad took me to see Aerosmith when I was young, as I say, he never kind of tried to steer me away from my mum's record collection or anything like that. It was just, music was always on in the household, and, you know, it's just I think it's a positive thing to have about.
Oh, absolutely. And there's something to be said for what you just said there, being exposed to a variety of different kinds of music. You know, we have defined ourselves as a band in the genre that we are, and we write within a certain amount of those confines, but at the same time, there you can't be put too much in a box musically. And
Hmm.
there's something to learn from so many genres that you can bring into what it is that you're playing as tools, right? Whether it
Definitely.
be from singing place or from a guitar playing place, regardless of what it is, there's something you can always take from there. There's little vocal things that I love that I learned from just playing Sam Cooke songs that I use in my vocal stylings to this day. There's aspects of songwriting from the Beatles and harmonies and how those sections are wrote that are just fascinating that, you know, I can bring into this genre of music. I spent a decent amount of time doing jazz in my early 20s,
Oh, cool.
and that opened up so many different chord voicings and approaches to writing, and as well as teaching me to play and write in a group setting where you have to put your ego aside and allow things to just change, which is important coming from being a solo musician for a lot of my time in my teens playing, because you have to learn to be collaborative and not be too attached to any one given idea and let things sort of go the direction that they're going.
Did you find that when you started to write things as the commoners, that came naturally to you, or was that something that you had to learn in terms of letting go of that sort of
It's
control that
definitely it's definitely something that I've had to learn because I spend a lot of time
you...
writing full song ideas, and you know, I can't write things by myself that the commoners now write as a group. And that one of the reasons why we are able to have this really cohesive sound that sounds like the commoners is because all of us are able to present ideas and allow those ideas to be influenced by the rest of the people in the band. So there were definitely some personal growing pains for me there. Um, but it's an important part of the process to learn to allow things to go in a direction you wouldn't take them yourself, precisely for the fact that you take them there yourself and you might end up somewhere real awesome that you wouldn't get to alone, right?
Definitely is. I mean, like you were saying, it's that, everybody throwing their bits in the soup, so to speak. It's that kind of context. And why I always liked asking the people on where their influences come in. In naturally hearing, having heard your albums and what you guys sound like, I could have picked two or three bands off the back, like Black Crows, Blackberry Smoke, all those kind of bands. That would have been the obvious kind of influences for you guys. But I'm always interested in hearing the non-obvious ones. Like I remember when I was chatting to Adam, he was mentioning on a drumming level how he was a big fan of Danny Carey of Tool, who I love Tool. My wife is a much more on the sort of progressive metal side of things, so I get a lot of that around the house, our house as well. And I love all that, but I never would have put Adam's drumming that I hear in the commoners necessarily along that direction. But then again, knowing that, and then when I heard the record again, not don't get wrong, you're not playing seven things in 7/4 or anything, but I did hear just little nuances and little things that you didn't explore the first time around. It's always interesting to see.
Flavors peppered in around, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, but that's part of the fun too, is taking things creatively. You take them in and then you learn how to have your own voice with them,
Mm.
sort of blend all of that stuff internally. And then when you get to where I feel like we are now in a band where, you know, we don't feel like a bunch of individuals just bringing fully formed ideas anymore. It's sort of become a hive mind. And the writing experience, writing in a group like the Commoners, is so uniquely different than, for instance, if I was just to sit here in this room with my guitar and write something now on my own. I mean, both are important to the process, but one of them is it just almost feels like something separate from yourself.
Yeah. So when you're writing, say for example, the new songs that you mentioned that you guys have been working on, is that a case of you forming a full, or any individual in the band forming a more or less a full idea on their own, or people just literally bringing in a core rough sketch, so to speak, and then
So
running with it?
I would say both. I would
Okay.
say it's very much both. Like I do oftentimes bring fully formed songs, but then at the same time, if you were to hear what it was when I brought it in the room as opposed to where it ends up. Like we were just working on a new song that we're going to be playing on tour in the UK, and my version of that song when I initially played it was quite folky. And then, you know, we patched some new guitar riffs that Ross was working on it. I changed some melodies, and it's a pretty epic rock song now. And so even I would say a lot of times things are bits and pieces, you know, like I'll bring in a verse or a chorus or a chord idea. Ross will bring in a guitar riff. Adam will have a groove idea. Ben is actually writes a lot of stuff acoustically on guitar as well as with bass. So Ben will bring in fully formed songs or snippet ideas with bass lines, that sort of thing. And it's almost all of it. You get bits and pieces, and then somebody will bring a fully formed idea. But regardless of which one it is, it always goes on a bit of a journey once it enters into that space where it's no longer any of us as individuals, but we're the commoners as a, like I said, almost like a hive mind.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's nice because I mean, I play bass myself and I've been in bands off and on, and it's always nice to see when it, you know, like that journey of a song from a beginning. You can be so proud of what you've like brung into the rehearsal room and jam room, wherever you are, and then it gets, for want of a better term, kicked around, knocked about. Everyone puts their stamp on it, and then it comes back to you. And sometimes you don't even recognize it anymore. To the point where I was last time I was in a band, not been in a band for a while, but I remember listening to a song, writing this track. Our guitarist had sent me a riff over, and I was playing around with it, and then it kind of got left, and I picked it up again a few months later, did a sort of rough sketch, brought it back to the band, and our guitarist was like, "Mate, this is killer. Where did you get this idea from?" I'm like, "You 6 months ago."
Exactly. And you know, that happened with a lot of tracks on the record. You know, like some of them were fully formed songs. Like the song Naturally was a mostly fully formed song that Ben brought to the table. And then we wrote a really interesting departure for it as a group, and changed a lot of the instrumentation of it and the way it was applied. And then there's songs like, you know, Find a Better Way, where that started off with a guitar riff that Ross had come up with. And then that inspires me to write about content or that I wouldn't have even really thought to write off of something that I would play. So then I do, you know, have some fun with writing from a different perspective, with a different narrative than I usually would. Ben gets to play on the bass and come up with some really cool grooves to work alongside with. And it's just, it can really be, it can go any way. Yeah. And that's what's, I think, really gratifying about it now when we are in that writing process, because it wasn't always like that. When you're first starting to work as a group, there are some growing pains where it's easy to be attached to your ideas. And so rather than being able to step away from a song and let it become what it needs to be, you're trying to push for something from your own place where you wrote it from.
Yeah.
And now that's just not how we write at all. And the songs, like I said, they almost feel like commoner songs, or it's like a separate entity. It's almost like it's not part of me, but it is.
Yeah, it's just not the bit that you thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. It's a version of me that I can't be without those other guys. And same thing with them. They're a version of themselves that they can't be without all of us. And that's, I think, one of the coolest things about being in a collaborative band is you do that. There's something special about that when you can find other human beings that you really have this language with, that it's hard to express.
It's hard to express. I think anyone who's only people who've been in that situation when you are all kicking in, and it doesn't even happen with every single band you're in. You know, I've been in bands where it just doesn't appear. But equally, you know, there's been in bands where you don't even have to look at each other. You just know what's about to happen, and you got that. There's something that exists between the lot of you that doesn't exist without, you know, the drummer being replaced or bass player or whoever it may be. It just doesn't exist without that other person.
Yeah, every so often there's just a certain dynamic that gets created with a certain group of people where it feels like there's just like magic in the air. It's just, it works.
Definitely.
That's what I think. That's why people, when they are in bands like ours, or like a lot of bands where it's special to them, it's something that you hold close and you really value, because it brings something to your life that you just don't have on your own. And when you get to do that, and then do things like tour Europe, and then go and do a tour in the UK, it's surreal, and it's I feel extremely lucky to have those opportunities.
Nice one, man. I mean, obviously, talking again about UK, you mentioned you're going for a different, sometimes you'll mix songs up a bit in terms of how you perform them live to how them being on a record. Are you breaking things down in terms of taking a song in a completely different direction, or is it just having a more raw sound live, or just more of a live filter because of the energy that's in the room?
So we try and do a little all of that, but a lot of it for me is I love when you go and see a band, and there's jam sections, and there's intro things that set an atmosphere, that set a mood, like you're going to watch a theatrical show, not just I'm not just going to walk up there, plug in the guitar, and then play the songs the way they are. I mean, we're going to play certain songs the way they are, and we're not taking songs in dramatically different directions, but we're really trying to curate the order that they're in, and the musical sections in between tracks and in the middle of tracks, to give people a real experience that I want people to leave and be like, wow, that was something.
Do you remember the first band that did that to you then? The first band you went to go see that was like, and made you think, holy shit, this is on another level?
That's a good question. I have to think about that. I don't know if I remember the first band, but I remember two bands that really stuck out as doing that for me.
Yeah.
Wasn't the first show I watched, but back when the Foo Fighters put out their Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace album.
I saw them.
Yeah, so you probably know the show I'm talking about. And they made it such an experience, like you go in and there's this big drone happening and everything, and then they kick off into the Pretender, and it's this epic piece. And then halfway through the set, the stage comes down and goes to the front, where now they have a full acoustic set before they go back and finish off the show. And they brought out Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson from Rush, and they played YYZ, and it was like they just gave you a unique experience. They made you feel like when you were there, you were getting something that you wouldn't have gotten unless you were there that night.
Yeah.
And then another one, obviously, I got to see Paul McCartney, which was an amazing live show. I mean, I'm a huge Beatles fan. And Paul McCartney's, again, one of my favorite singers. The guy has such a wide range with his vocals and technique, like the different textures that he can create, and also an amazing songwriter. And getting him to, I think he was 69 at the time, and watching him play, I think he played for close to 4 hours. It was bananas. and it was such a good, once again, just such a good show. There was moments in it. There was different sections. You had acoustic moments where there were jams, moments that were intimate, moments that were grandiose. And once again, you leave that feeling like, wow, I was just included in something. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, obviously, I don't have pyrotechnics, and we're not going to drop a stage from the sky, but we're going to try and achieve that musically.
There's nothing wrong with that, buddy. Like I say, I was on the Foo Fighters, Silence, Echo, Space, and other Grace tour that I saw over here, and I only got to go because my housemate at the time was at university. He was going, and cutting a long story short, his brother had a ticket become available at the last minute because it was a sold out show. So he comes knocking on my door like first thing in the morning, because his brother lived back home sort of in a way from us. He's like, man, I've got a spare ticket for the Foo Fighters if you want it. And I was supposed to be going to work that day, but I obviously called in sick and went to the show instead. But like you had, Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee come out at Wembley when they did it. They brung out Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones.
Yeah.
And I was just stood there like, I'm so glad I called in sick. Like,
yeah.
That's literally the closest I've ever got to seeing Zeppelin. And as a bass player, John Paul Jones is like my absolute ultimate. And, I never would have seen, to that point, hadn't seen him play live. I saw him later on with them Crooked Vultures. But, to that point, I hadn't seen him live. So it was definitely a moment I'm like, I'm really glad I called in sick, and I'm really glad that your mate was ill, so he couldn't come.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I mean, and what a great show to just go to by happenstance, right? Like that's super awesome. And it's exactly, but it is that. It's you feel like you're witnessing something.
Yeah,
Like you're not just there watching a band play their record, because if somebody wants to just hear a great version of the record, well, I mean, we recorded one and it's out there for sale, and you can. So if people are going to spend money to come see us live, we want to give them something to see.
so if you could go out and support someone on like a more upscale, bigger show, of that kind of nature, who would you want to support?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of really good acts right now that are in our genre. I mean, Blackberry Smoke is an amazing band. Um, would love to have the opportunity to play with a band like Tedeschi Trucks.
Nice.
Marcus King is phenomenal. I love
His
that
new
guy.
album, like you say, his new album, stunning.
It's so good. The guy is an amazing guitar player. He's got such a unique voice, and honestly, the songwriting is fantastic too. I think songs like "Goodbye Carolina," you listen to the lyrics in those songs, and they're so well written. Um, I would love to have an opportunity to play with bands like that.
Nice. Nice one, man. Good choice as well. Thanks for your time, Chris. Thank you for coming to our UK shores in a couple of weeks' time. Really looking forward to seeing you, buddy. And like I say, we'll be at the Nottingham show, so I'm looking forward to that. At the beginning of the show, I am going to play "Make Your Own Mistake" as it's your the brand new single. But what song of yours would you like us to play at the end of the interview?
You know what? Let's play one that's going to be talking a little bit more about what I was talking about, those musical moments and changes. If we want to play "Hanging On,"
Oh, cool. Wicked. I'm up for that, bud. All right, Chris.
right?
Well, thanks for your time, man. And yeah, I'll see you when you come over.
Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to playing for you and shaking your hand, brother.
No worries, man. We'll have a beer, dude.
Absolutely.
I've already promised Adam, so now I've got to buy at least two.
Happy I hear you got really good beer over there, so I'm looking forward to that.
All right, man. I'll see you then. Take care, buddy.